Greetings and welcome to Little Readers Podcast, dedicated to literacy, listening skills, and comprehension, focusing on social and emotional learning. Today, our episode includes the story entitled Martin's Scarf, taken from the book 24 Stories for Advent, written by Brigitte Weninger, illustrated by Eve Tharlet, and published by NorthSouth Books Inc. in 2015. Now, this story is considered realistic fiction. That means that it really could happen, but the characters are imagined by the author. The main character is Martin, and he's about 8 years old. In the story, he meets a homeless man, or the author refers to the homeless man as a beggar. It takes place in a small town, any small town in the world. At the end of the story, we will discuss the important idea we can learn from Martin. Let's begin. November was Martin's favorite month because it contained his birthday, precisely on St. Martin's Day. In the afternoon, there would be scrumptious cakes and lots of presents, and in the evening, Martin and his mother would join the procession in the marketplace, where all the children would be carrying lanterns and singing. However, on this particular birthday, Martin announced, "I'm a big boy now. I can go on my own." His mother thought about it for a moment, and then she nodded. "Okay, if you think you can do it, then I think so too." Martin put on his coat and wrapped his favorite bright striped scarf around his neck. Mom didn't like that scarf and, as usual, shouted, Must you wear that silly thing?" Martin simply put a few coins in his pocket so that he could buy himself some hot fruit punch and a donut. Then he lit his lantern and set off on his way. His lantern hung from a stick that he carried over his shoulder. There were no cars in the streets today. The center of the town was blocked off for the procession, and lantern-carrying children and adults gathered on the marketplace. They were all happy and excited, and nobody noticed the beggar or homeless person hunched up in a dark doorway next to the church. But Martin stopped. He was puzzled. Could the beggar be one of the actors who would be performing a play about St. Martin? If so, surely he would be out there on the stage and not sitting in the dark. And he would certainly be wearing warmer clothes. Martin could see that the beggar was shivering from the cold. He felt sorry for him, and he went a few steps closer. He wanted to help him, but how? He could hardly copy St. Martin and cut his coat in two. When the bright light fell on his face, the beggar looked up in surprise. With a smile, he pointed at the lantern and said something in a foreign language. Martin smiled back and thoughtfully fingered the coins in his jacket pocket. Should he give them to the beggar, or perhaps invite him for some hot fruit punch? But this man needed winter boots, a jacket, and a warm scarf, maybe. Then, suddenly, Martin knew exactly what he could do. He had a super-duper idea. He cried, "Come on, come on!" He was very excited. "You must come with me, please." The man looked bewildered at the frantically waving Martin. He stood up with a painful groan, pulled the sleeves of his thin jacket down over his fingers, and followed the swiftly bobbing lantern over Martin's shoulder. Martin led the man to a brightly lit doorway behind the church. This was the used clothing store that was run by the church and in which his grandmother sometimes worked. He visited her there a few times. Martin rushed in. He put his money on the counter and he said, "Please, can I have a pair of men's boots for this change? Or maybe a winter coat?" The assistant looked at Martin, the lantern, and the beggar, and laughed. Oh, yes, St. Martin, I'm sure we'll find something. She poured out a mug of hot tea for the man and made him sit by the stove. Then she brought 2 pairs of woolen socks, warm underclothes, fur-lined boots, a shirt and a pullover, a coat, a soft hat, and gloves. Martin cried in amazement, "Wow! What? All those clothes for so little money? Just my coins that I had in my pocket?" The assistant nodded. "Oh, yes, lots of nice people give us money and clothes they don't need anymore. Then we pass them on to the poor people." She took the beggar to a little room where he could wash and change. When he came back in his warm clothes, his cheeks were rosy and his whole face was covered with a big, radiant smile. He shook the assistant's hand. Then he bent down to Martin to thank him too. "Wait," said Martin, "there's something missing." And around the man's neck he carefully wound his favorite bright striped scarf. Then Martin switched on his lantern again, waved happily to the beggar, and ran across the marketplace to join the other children. Inside, he felt wonderfully warm and comfortable, even though he no longer had a scarf, and he hadn't had a drop of hot fruit punch. The end. Now, boys and girls, the realistic elements of this story are many. First of all, there are many towns, small towns and large towns, that have celebrations where the people gather in the center of town. You may be looking forward to one this year at Christmas time around the town Christmas tree, or maybe there's a parade. Also, another realistic element of this story is many organizations work together to help other people in need. Martin felt wonderfully warm and comfortable at the end of the story because he was able to help the homeless man in a big way. It makes you feel good, even great, when you help someone in need. And that is exactly how Martin felt. Christmas is a time for giving and sharing what we have with others. Helping others can be as simple as Martin made it in the story. He just gave his coins as an offering. You can do the same by dropping your coins in the red kettles put out by the organization called the Salvation Army. Usually, these kettles have a volunteer ringing a bell. Look for them, and if you have some coins in your pocket, drop them in the red kettle and know that your donation will help someone in need this Christmas season. Also know every little bit helps. Martin discovered that it didn't matter how much he gave. The point was he did give in order to help someone else. This is Miss Jones signing off until next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and remember Martin and share during this holiday season.